welcome back to episode 9 of the Waiting Talks. We can't believe we made it this far.
Woohoo!
So exciting. Yes. We have some amazing and wonderful guests with us this time. We have Tabitha and Denny Thomas. Woo! We're so excited to
Hey.
have them here. And our relationship with both of them goes back a little further. We've known Tabitha for at least the last 10 years. She started a little but not so little thing called WOW in our community. And we've had the opportunity to just connect with her and a lot of the women in our community because of how God led her with WOW. Aside from that, Tabitha also has her jewelry business. She makes all this stuff by herself, y'all. I'm sure Denny is also there in the background helping, but that's just amazing, isn't it? Like that's so crazy. So we're gonna leave all the information for y'all on how to look at her business. Um, and then also we have Denny here. He's an optometrist. He is from Houston, but we're still working on making him that official Dallas site. Hopefully he can say that loud and proud at the end of this this conversation, but we'll see. They've been married for 3 years, and we're just really excited to hear more about them and hear how the Lord's been leading them in their season of waiting. So, guys, welcome. We're so happy to have y'all here. So first off, we just want to know a little bit about about both of you. So, tell us where you guys were born, what's your favorite hobby, and what you're currently up to now.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We are so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys. Thanks for doing this too and inviting us.
Yeah, we love what you guys are doing. Super proud of you guys for continuing on with this. We know it's no small endeavor, but yeah, a little bit about us. We actually were both born in India, and we came here when we were young, which I guess nobody ever really believes. But we both are actually born in Mumbai too, so that's kind of a fun fact.
And we didn't know that.
Yeah, we didn't know that until
Nobody
we
does.
until
That's
we yeah, when we knew each other. So that was kind of fun. What do we like to do, Deb?
So she likes to eat. I
Yeah.
like to cook. So we feel like it's a good combo.
Yeah.
Like we
That
go
is a good call.
places and we try new foods to eat. So
Yes.
that's kind of one of the things we enjoy doing. We love well, I love coffee, and then she has
And
kind
then
of
I
taken upon that.
unfortunately like coffee now too.
Got her hooked in coffee.
Mm,
And then yeah, we also enjoy listening to podcasts. So
mhm. We consider ourselves podcast junkies, so this is right up our alley.
okay. Love it.
Yeah, so we stay pretty busy. We run a lot of different things, and Denny is a great help with all the things I like to do. I consider myself a visionary, and I consider him like the person who executes the vision. So God was sweet when he matched us both up.
That's so nice. Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys again for just sharing some fun facts about you guys with the audience. It really does seem like you guys are two peas in a pod and that the Lord really orchestrated both of you guys and y'all's marriage. Thank you guys again for coming on. I wanted to ask you guys, I'm actually going to probably combine these two questions together so you guys just have more time just to share with the audience. The second question that we have for you guys is, how has the waiting season looked for both of you guys? If it's been multiple waiting seasons, if you guys are in one right now, and how do you think that season is shaping your calling or the ministry that the Lord has called you guys to?
Yeah, I can start off with that. I feel like the waiting season, at least for me personally, and then I think I can also speak for us in our marriage too. It's never really ended. You're always waiting for the next thing, and it's like this cycle of waiting. So um, that's kind of been like the waiting season. It's never really fully. There's no end point. It's just a process of learning to trust in God throughout your entire life, essentially. Because once you are finished waiting for one thing, and then you're waiting for the next thing, right? So there's always something that you're waiting for. And so there's a lot of ups and downs. At least for me, sometimes waiting can be messy. Um, Waiting can, be a lot of like not knowing where to put my trust in. Sometimes, like, yeah, the right answer is to, yeah, you had to trust in God, but sometimes, like, there's a lot of questioning and doubts and concerns that come up, and so it can get a little bit more difficult. And so that's just kind of the honest truth. Even if you're a believer, it's just being honest with yourself and saying, okay, there's those moments in life where it can get messy in the waiting seasons.
Mhm. Yeah, so we are in a long waiting season right now of really all the things. God was sweet to bring us together, but then once we got together, I've been trying to figure out living situations, or trying to figure out dream jobs, or trying to figure out, what does it look like to be part of a different kind of church. So we've been searching for that. What does community look like? Even learning to wait, I think, on hearing the Lord together has been a little difficult for us. So both of us love Jesus and we both can hear the Lord separately. But I think even learning to wait on the Lord together has been a little bit of a struggle for us. And so we've got all the waiting seasons up our alley that we could talk about. Which one do you want to hear about?
Honestly, I think y'all are spot on though. Like the seasons of waiting are just continuous, you know. If you're
Mhm.
waiting for one thing and God comes through for it, it just feels like there's another one that's right after. So
Yeah.
I think I really relate to that as well. It's just like I think you see a new aspect of God in each waiting season, and yeah, it's the honest truth. Sometimes you don't even know how can I trust God in this waiting season. So,
Yeah.
but we're excited to hear whatever waiting season you want to talk about.
Yeah. I think I like what you guys are saying about how it can be messy too. Because in the waiting, it's like, am I hearing God correctly? Am I hearing, or is this myself? There's a lot of ways to be confused in the waiting as well. So I think that's a good point that you guys bring. But then, that's how we can strengthen each other by our testimony and by what the Lord does in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something that we have realized as we've been, living life together and kind of in the waiting season. I think it's brought us closer to the Lord. And I think really that's the point of waiting, in the sense that God's people have always been a people who wait. If we look at any, really any major Bible character, they have had a season of waiting. And so sometimes I think we can see it as a bad thing. And so I know we've discussed this where we have just, as a body of Christ, like we need to learn to adapt to change better. And we also need to learn to wait better, because those two things are almost like 100% guarantees for believers. There is always going to be change, and there's always going to be a season to wait. I know for us, like with our relationship, it was funny because I wasn't really looking for anybody. And to be honest, I was one of those, I had gotten to a point in my life where I was ready to be the woman version of Paul. I was like, I'm going to do singleness. We're going to run this race. The Lord was kind enough, like Shirley mentioned, had given me a ministry at a young age. And so I was like, I don't know any man that's going to be willing to serve me and to serve this ministry, and I know that this is what God's calling me to do, so I guess I'm gonna run my race as best as I can. And lo and behold, Denny comes, and he comes in hot, like he is ready to pursue. And I wasn't ready for that, in the sense of, I thought I had made God a deal of, hey God, like, I'm going to just wait on you and I just want to be with you and let's build our relationship. So I think when Denny started to pursue me, I was like, Lord, is my waiting season over? And I was actually a little sad about it. No, why? Like, don't you want me for yourself, Lord?
That's so funny.
But God was sweet in the sense of teaching me of what it looks like to trust Him, even in the waiting for a spouse, or to trust Him in something better than I could see for myself.
That's good.
That I thought I could do this ministry by myself. And in these last 3 years that we've been married, like, we have been able to transform WOW 10 times more than I've been able to do in the last, 7 years by myself. And then in these 3 years, we've been able to expand all over the country, which has been really cool. And that would have never happened if God hadn't brought our stories together, because really, like I said, I have a lot of vision, but sometimes I don't necessarily have the actions or the abilities to make those processes happen. And Denny is kind of the complete opposite in a lot of things. But specifically for that, he has been able to take a lot of my visions and bring them into fruition. And so there has been a lot of times where I have said something, and then a few weeks later, a few months later, he's created it or he's done it for me. And it's been really, really cool, because had I chosen, one, to say no to him, or two, to be like, Lord, I want to wait with you forever, I could have really missed out on something really beautiful. And so I think that's sometimes what we have to think about, is like, waiting is not the rest of our lives. Sometimes we can get content in the waiting, and we can say, oh, like, I guess this is just, or comfortable, maybe even comfortable in the waiting of, okay, well, I guess it's been a long time. And then when something starts to shake the water a little bit, we can start to get scared, or we can get fearful. What is that new season gonna look like? Like, I'm comfortable in the season. It may not be what I really want, but at least I'm comfortable and I know what's happening.
That's
uh,
good. Yeah.
and so, therefore, I think we can sometimes miss out on things too if we get too comfortable waiting, or even prolonging a season. That's another conversation, but I definitely have prolonged a season or two, just because I wasn't ready to move when God said to move.
Yeah, I think also uh, sometimes like we think our like we want things to be done our way, and we think sometimes our way makes the most sense. Um, like I'm reminded of like the story of Lazarus and Mary and Martha. Like Martha, well, anyone, any human being would think, okay, Jesus needs to heal him like when he's still alive, like right. And so it makes sense. Like, okay, like I want things to happen when it makes sense to me, right? But God is like wanting to do something, like not just for your good, but also for His glory. And so being like under, and you don't see that until later on, like in retrospect, you see, oh, I saw how God did this in my life, and I saw how now because of that, like many people know about that testimony or know about that because of what He did. And if it had gone my way, God would never have received the glory, or there never would have been a testimony either. So I think at the end of the day, it's God is for your good, but also God is for His glory too. And it's also being like, it's about Him, like, okay, I'm submitting myself to His will and like the way He wants to do things. And it's very tough too, because again, like me, myself, I have a control issue when it comes to like doing, I want to get things done my way. I'm a very like a fidgety person. Like I can't sit still. So I gotta like, things have to keep moving. If they don't move, then I try to do it myself. Like, okay, God, if you're not gonna do it for me, let me just try to do this on my own. And when we do it that way, it's like He's not getting the glory. we're getting glory because we're trying to do it out of our own strength and out of our own, ability. And then we're, in a sense, almost, stealing what he can do in our lives and stealing his glory from him.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of that verse in Isaiah 40 where it says, "But those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength, and they will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not be faint." I think when we don't realize, when we wait on the Lord and when our hope is in the Lord, like he renews our strength to run. Um, a lot of times we, like Denny said, we can do a lot of things on our own accord. Kind of like I was talking about, like with WOW, I was walking for a long time. And then once I was able, like once I partnered with Denny and once the Lord started to reveal like vision to both of us, we were really able to start running and we weren't weary. And I think that verse is so important for those of us in waiting seasons. It's like, hey, waiting is not bad. And sometimes we can think waiting is bad, but it's just another season that the Lord's asking us to be part of, so that we can develop something. There's something he's trying to develop before phase 2. Like waiting is phase 1 and then phase 2 comes after. And so maybe we've prayed about something. We've prayed for, God's will to be done. Like right now we're waiting for a house, or we're waiting for some kind of living situation to move. And we've been in our current season for a lot longer than we thought we would be in. And so it can get frustrating, but we're trying to constantly remind ourselves, hey, like God has the best for us out there if we can just wait and wait well. It reminds me of like the Israelites when they were brought into a season of wilderness. They were meant to go to the wilderness, worship God, learn what they needed to learn. And scholars say that they were supposed to get out of the wilderness in about 11 days or 2 weeks. And they ended up staying there for 40 years. Like, how terrible would it be that because we couldn't wait well, or because we couldn't be patient, or because we were grumbling and complaining, God had to prolong a season for 40 years? Like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. So I think what we're trying to do in this season is to remind ourselves, like, hey, God is not done. He is working even in the waiting, and he is trying to prepare us for the next season. Like the waiting is meant to be a preparation season, or it's meant to prepare you to walk, or really to run in the following season. And so sometimes God will give you a season where he needs you to pause, or to rest, or to wait, because you've burnt out all of your energy, or you've burnt all the resources you had in your previous season. So you need to get some new stuff. You need to get whatever needs to be got before season 2, which I think sometimes we don't realize, and we're just like, Lord, why is it taking so long? I know for me that's kind of been this season also. Waiting has been hard for me in previous years. I was never a waiter. I don't relax. Most of my friends know it was hard for me to sit still also. So in that way, we have something in common, me and Denny. But they always called me the Energizer Bunny because I could keep going. And really, I think it was the grace of God on my life to be able to do what I was doing at the time. But I could tell when the pandemic happened, most of my life fell apart. But it was very strategic on the Lord's part. He really needed me to stop, not even pause, but really just stop and get reoriented to him, and to say, hey, Lord, this is who you are. My hope, who I am, is in you. And it's not in my identity, it's not in my titles, it's not what I've done, it's not where I'm going or what I want to do. And I think somewhere along the way I had started to put my hope and my identity in the stuff I was doing. So he really needed to pull the rug from out under me, in order to learn to wait, and to wait well, and to rest well. So I think that's what we're even learning in this season, is just to do those two things well, because it's one thing to wait, but it's another thing to wait well. And it's one thing to rest, or sleep, or you can rest and Sabbath well. And I think those are two things that God is actually calling us as a people to do.
That's so powerful. I feel like there's just so much to unpack in all that you guys said, actually. Um, I think that's the crazy part. I think everyone's always looking for what that end destination is or what the end goal is, but in reality, we don't recognize that God has that bigger picture in mind. But are we willing to like just walk with him in wherever he's leading? Especially when you guys brought up the example of the Israelites. Like, that's insane to me that what should have taken 2 weeks or less took 40 years. I'm not 40 yet, but like that's a long time. I could not imagine walking that long. Um, but yeah, I think sometimes we get in our own way because we don't really recognize that walking with the Lord he will lead us to the best places if only we will follow his lead. So I love that you guys shared all that. It's so true. It's really tough. It's really tough to follow the Lord when he is leading you. Sometimes it doesn't look the way, like you guys mentioned, it doesn't look the way you thought it would. But honestly, he has always the best in mind for us. And at the end of the day, it's all about him too, right? Maybe we can even start looking more at like how we can spend more time with him and focus on his presence rather than what it is that we want in the end. He always brings us the best at the end of the day. um
Touching on that, Charlotte, if you don't mind, I think also like we forget our relationship too. Like when we get caught up in the waiting and not getting what we want, or getting it in the way we want, or getting in the time we want, we focus too much on that, and then we lose sight of who God is to us. Like
yeah.
I'm reminded of like if there's a dad and and he wants to give his child a good gift, but he knows the child isn't ready for it yet. But the child really wants this, right? Then if all the child does is to focus on the gift, and what he loses his time out that he can get with the father, with his relationship with the father, the time that he can go play baseball or sports or just hanging out with his dad. He loses that time because he's so focused on the gift that his dad's trying to give him. And so I think we're kind of a lot of times in that situation where we lose sight of who God is to us. He is our heavenly Father, and as much as He wants to give us the things that we need and the things that even we want, He knows what's best for us at the end of the day, and He knows when we're ready to receive. But in that waiting season, also just remembering that He is my Father, and I need to spend time with Him. Going back to reading His Word, spending time in prayer, just remembering to do that, because the relationship is what's most important than anything else. It's our time and being able to connect with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you were talking, I think that's exactly the same like imagery that came into my mind. Is sometimes we take for granted the people that are closest to us, right? I mean, at least I do. Um, and so sometimes I do think that we neglect actually sitting and enjoying the Lord, enjoying and delighting in walking with him. And we're so hyper focused on where am I going? How am I succeeding? Like all these like worldly things that we should gain. It all comes in different timings for each of us, but I think we can really miss out on building a relationship with the Lord if we're so hyper focused on those things. But you guys shared some incredible things. That was really powerful. And you guys mentioned that to encourage yourselves, you guys would continually go back and remind yourself, this is how God has shown himself in the past. This is what his character has been like. Are there any other things that y'all use to encourage yourselves in those really difficult moments of waiting as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things is to have people that spur you on in the waiting, encourage you. I know, like for me, Tabitha's a huge encourager. Having community, having brothers and sisters in your life, mentors, people that speak life into you when you're in that, like, literally the pit of waiting sometimes, and you get a lot of doubts, and uh, it, it's having that community around you. It's really important, and if you don't, it's important to get that too. So that's kind of what I would say about that.
And then reading the word, I know a lot of times in our waiting season that can be hard to do, but really something that we have noticed and something that I think we need to be talking more about in the body of Christ is even when you don't want to do it, because there is something in you that will shift when you start to spend time with the Lord, when you start to pray. Even if you complain before the Lord, if you share your heart, if you share your mind, like He will start to give you verses to meditate on. He will start to give you things that you may not have thought about before. I know for me, he has started as I've been giving him what I share and the things I've been telling him, he helps you actually even reframe and redefine what you're looking at. Like he'll give you new perspective because we are finite beings and we don't even know what we're looking at, right? Like it reminds me of an artist who knows the whole picture, and we're just one stroke that's happening. So we might not understand like what big picture God is trying to make. But if we can say, hey, God, like, what are you doing? Can I get some insight? Can you show me who I'm supposed to be becoming? Am I supposed to be learning something? Instead of asking God to get you out of the season, something that's really helped me is asking better questions or reframing my questions. Instead of being like, Lord, why is my life so hard? I can ask God, what are you trying to do in this season? Who are you trying to make me become in this season? Is there something I'm supposed to be learning that I wouldn't have been able to learn in any other season? Because there's things that God is trying to teach us and show us, but because sometimes we're complaining or we're grumbling or we're always looking for something else, we may not learn or we may not understand what he's trying to do at this moment. So I think really spending time in the word and then asking God questions and trying to help or have him help me redefine, reframe, change perspective has been really, really helpful too.
Yeah, that's really good too, because I feel like as Christians and as his children, like when we are called to do life with him, we have to see life through the lens that he sees and his plans for us to prosper us, and his plans are for good. And I think it goes back to what you guys are saying about waiting and to kind of like unbox the lies that we have about the Lord maybe in the waiting season, you know? Yeah, I think like what you guys are saying, in the waiting season, like in our hearts, like the truth of God sometimes, like our own truth about God sometimes comes out. Like we think, oh man, like why is he not giving me this at this time? Like, is he really a good father? And, you know, and it just like really like the waiting season brings that out of us. But then that's why it's so crucial for us to be able to surround ourselves with the truth of God and be like, he is a good father. He is not withholding something good from me while I wait, you know. He's actually preparing something for me, you know. And I think it's so crazy how you guys were talking about Lazarus too before, because that's something that I've been kind of dwelling on in this season of my life as well. And I think the fact that Jesus like wept with them even when they had so many questions, and Jesus had every right to go off on them and get irritated. He took the moment and he wept with them, and I think it kind of showed his character in that. And in our waiting season, he has compassion towards us. and he's actually there with us in that moment, in the moments of our frustration, in the moments of our doubt, and I think it's just so profound to see all the characteristics of the Lord, while we wait and while we suffer, that I think that was so beautiful, just putting everything together. I just wanted to ask you guys a last question. For the younger generation that's so used to, fast food, used to Amazon Prime, everything, not used to waiting that much. I can definitely be counted in that too, not pointing fingers. What is y'all's piece of advice for them?
So something that we really want to emphasize is whatever work God is doing while you wait is just as important as what you're waiting for. Because God is really, really concerned about our character and who we're becoming.
Yeah. One of the big things that we're really like passionate about, or like really into seeing in our own lives, is like, how are we, like as a couple, how are we individually growing in our faith in Jesus? And so knowing that like waiting is a way in which that it's kind of a way in which we take vitamins to grow, or like our faith. It's a sense of like it's meant to develop us essentially. It's meant to develop our character and our faith in God, and in doing that, it's allowing us to become more of a mature believer. Uh, you know,
Because he's interested more in your character than in your comfort. And as much as we like to be comfortable as people, God wants to make sure that we are becoming holy more than we're necessarily happy. Of course, he wants us to enjoy life and the things that he's created, but ultimately, what he's trying to do is have us as a people be set apart. And he is trying to form something within each of us, his children, so that we will be prepared to reign and rule with him, right? And so there's things that God is doing in every season, especially the waiting seasons, so that you can hold up whatever is next. Like when we even think about Joseph, because he was in a pit, because he had dealt with Potiphar's wife, because he had dealt with his brothers betraying him, like all of these things that took years and years and years. By the time he had become second in command with Pharaoh, he could hold the weight of that. And the same thing when we think about David, he was a shepherd and he had to kill a lion and a bear, and he had to kill Goliath. And Saul, his father-in-law, was trying to kill him. There was so many things that he had to go through in order to become the king that was the man after God's own heart, right? Like there's things that the waiting and these wilderness seasons can sometimes be for us to be who God is creating and wanting us to be, so that we don't fall when the pressure hits us or when the weight of the world hits us in those positions or in those titles or in the seasons where we're having to do a lot or be a lot. It's these seasons of waiting that will form you and shape you and create you to withhold all of that later on in your life.
and it's like these seasons of waiting, they're meant to prepare us. They're meant to stretch us. They're meant to um, you know cause you to be ready for what's next. And it's always just being reminded of, like Tabitha said earlier, the waiting feels bad, but in what feels bad, remembering He is good. It's constantly reminding yourself of His goodness and trusting in that, and just fully embracing that truth.
Mm-hmm. And remembering that He is our hope and not hoping in the things or hoping in the seasons to change. I know that's something that I have been struggling with. Is like when I get a glimmer of hope that the season's almost done, I'm like, oh, yay, the carrots are dangling and I'm about to eat it. And then the carrots feel like they're being taken away. But something a good friend reminded me is like, hey, you are starting to hope in the things instead of remembering that your hope is ultimately in Christ. And so we don't get to lose hope because our hope is always with us through Jesus, like Denny said.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And as you both were talking, actually, I actually was reminded of some verses that I was reading the other day. Um, the first one is, hopefully I say it right. I never say these Bible, the books of the Bible correctly. Habakkuk, hopefully that's right. Chapter 2, verse 4. It says, "Look at the proud. They trust in themselves and their lives are crooked, but the righteous will live by their faithfulness to God." And then also in First Peter, chapter 1, um, most of it is really applicable to what we're talking about. But in verse 6, it says, "So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world." So, like you guys were mentioning, that we live with great expectation, but these trials help build our faith so that when people finally see Jesus for who he really is in the midst of all this, he gets all the glory, he gets all the honor, he gets all the praise. And yeah, I think he is waiting to see who on the earth has faith, who wants to you know, show their faithfulness to him. And so that was really just great advice for this next generation. I think that's really beautiful. I think the things that you guys have shared is just so powerful, is so applicable to a lot of people's lives. I know a lot of people will really be able to take that and use that and apply that in their own life. And we're so thankful that you guys decide to come along and just share your experiences, share how the Lord's been leading you. It's not easy in waiting season, but thank you for being honest and vulnerable about your whole experiences. Um, if you guys don't mind, we would love if one of you guys could pray and end off this conversation.
I can pray. Father God, we just thank you for this time that you've given us to come, God, just together, even on this podcast, Father, as your children, God, as we get to speak, God, words of encouragement to each other and to just think about you more than anything, Father. God, the opportunities that we get to just to go into your word and to think about your goodness in our life. God, that we get to be a part of your story, God, of what you're doing. Yeah, we get to know you, so we just don't take that for granted, God. We just pray, God, as we've been talking about the season of waiting, Father, that ultimately you are teaching us, God, you are growing us, you are developing us. I just pray for those who are out there, God, in that season, God, and even in the midst of just that constant questioning and the doubts, God, and just the uncertainty, Father, and even feeling like they are losing trust in you, God, and losing their faith in you, God, that they feel like they want to take things into their own hands and matters into their own hands, Father. God, would you remind them that you are good, God, that you are not for their harm, God, that you are not doing anything for evil, Father, but you are our good Father. We can trust in you, God. You have what's prepared for us, God. That we can put our hope and our trust in you, not on your hands, Father, not on simply the things that you give us, God, because we know those things, God, are fading and temporal. But Father, you are God, never changing. God, you are eternal, and help us to put God, our heart in those things, God. Would we not store our treasures on God, things that are of this world, Father? But would you teach us to, God, put our faith in you, store our treasures on things that are eternal, God. God, through the seasons of waiting, God, through the seasons of difficulty, of suffering, of anxiety, of stress, when we just things just don't make sense. God, would you give us your patience? God, would you give us um, your peace? God, would you remind us through your word? Holy Spirit, would you lead us back to you in your presence, God? For in your presence there is fullness of joy. In your presence there's peace, God. In your presence we can find assurance and be reminded that you are in control of our lives, God. Help us to, God, just continue to set our gaze on you, Father. As we look around, as Peter looked around, God, in his circumstances, he began to drown. But God, when he looked to you, God, that he was able to walk with faith and trusting that you had his life in his hands, Father, would we be in the same way reminded that, God, you are doing things for your glory, God. You're doing things that your name will be glorified through our lives. And would our lives be a testimony, God, and a declaration of that faith in you, God. So would you continue to speak to us, God, draw us near to you. Would you receive glory through our lives? Thank you for this time, for God, Charlotte and Rachel, Father, what they're doing through this podcast. Would you continue to bless it and bless all the listeners and all those that are part of this podcast, God. Thank you for all you're doing.
Amen. Thank you guys again for coming on and just sharing y'all's hearts. And to the audience, we will also have Tabitha and Denny's Instagram or info down below, so you guys can always reach out to them if you guys have questions as well. And thank you guys for listening, and have a blessed week. Bye.